Hello aspirants, welcome to Lukmaan IAS. Now we are going to discuss in detail the GS1 geography section of this year's mains examination 2025. And yes, earlier we had given you brief review about the nature of questions and the difficulty level of overall paper. But yes, now we are going to go in detail and try to analyze the nature of questions also and the content of those questions, what let's say expected lines that we should follow in those questions, right? So let's try to see the first question directly. So we are going to understand what kind of introduction we are going to give in these questions, in the body part what dimensions we should explore, and in conclusion what kind of let's say standard conclusion can be written in these questions. So first question, yes, look at these let's say questions. Already when we are giving the brief review, we said that all 10 markers in geography section had this command of like explain with examples, discuss with suitable or relevant examples. So that means in geography examples is very important as a core part of let's say answer. Along with that, drawing diagrams and maps is also very important. So let's try to see where we can bringing all these aspects in our answer. Very standard question they are asking, like last year and last year there was question on impact of climate change on food security of tropical nations. So that means this has been like standard question, impact of climate change, global warming on different aspects of we can say human life on the earth, and they are not limiting that to India. Try to understand this thing as it is let's say proper world geography part. So first question, how climate change and the sea level rise affecting the very existence of many island nations. Okay, climate change first and the sea level rise. Although sea level rise is we can say a consequence of we can say climate change, discuss with examples. So here let's try to understand what we can introduce here. In introduction, recent report or data about sea level affecting the island nations. So if there is any data related to NOAA Institute or we can say International Maritime Organization is there, or related to UNEP report, IPCC report, if that report is talking about the sea level rise and submergence of various island nations like we can say Pacific small island countries or those island nations like Maldives, Mauritius in Indian Ocean region. So you should mention that data here in introduction. In body part, what we can mention, simply go on explaining how climate change and sea level rise affecting various aspects of island nations. So be it land submergence or affecting the livelihood of the people, the climate change or climate induced migration from these island nations, and overall economy of these let's say nations including tourist activities. So how it is going to affect, because it is talking about very existence. So it is talking about all the aspects of human life in those island nations and with suitable examples you should be giving. And finally, need of let's say climate change mitigation and adaptation, especially for these island nations we need to focus on adaptation fund that is there, the newly brought adaptation fund is there. Also the small island nations are having a separate grouping of representation in the climate talks. You can bring any aspect in conclusion talking about mitigation and adaptation aspect of climate change. Now let's go in detail and try to understand. Yes, we have added one data in introduction that in next 30 years, Pacific island nations such as Tuvalu, Kiribati and Fiji will experience at least let's say 6 inches of sea level rise or 15 centimeter according to an analysis by NASA's sea level change science team. So this was in newspaper. I am not taking out from directly NASA website. It was in newspaper, and that's why we are taking this fact here. In next 30 years, 15 centimeter. You can imagine, like for all these islands, more than 50% of its land will be submerged underwater by 30 years from here onwards. Such kind of striking data can be mentioned. Report can be mentioned in introduction. Okay? Now, what kind of aspects we can mention here when we are discussing how it is going to impact these island nations. So first we can talk about is let's say submergence, the striking point that we get in our mind whenever we say sea level rise. Yes, we can write down that of course So submergence is, we can say that first aspect. You can give one example here. We can say that Tuvalu submersion risk is there, or we can say that various other aspects are also there. Flooding will be the Marshall Islands. We can talk like this. Now, the submergence is very, let's say, common impact that all islands, low-lying islands, including Maldives, in Indian Ocean, because they are having around like 5 centimeter to 10 centimeter. All land is maximum like this much above sea level. ठीक है, तो इतना ही उनका हाइट है मीन सी लेवल से. तो we can understand the impact of small sea level rise on these islands. The major is the land, and this for small islands what happens is land is a scarce resource. ठीक है, अब देखिए when there is submergence, or we can say that increase in sea level rise, there will be salt water intrusion for sure, and that salt water intrusion into the groundwater aquifers, that is the main source of drinking water for these islands. Now that is going to be lost. अब सोचिए कि पानी ही नहीं है उस आइलैंड्स पे, तो वो कैसे जिंदा रह सकता है. They do not have that much investment to get, let's say, to do in the desalination plants, but they are working on that. But the technology is very costly, and that's why it requires lot of efforts from these island nations to adopt that technology. Third thing is coastal erosion. So slowly, through coastal erosion, there will be loss of land. Again, we can say that the land is an important resource for all these countries. Then what happens is, when there is increased sea level, the impact of storm surges, including coastal flooding, will be very high. Okay, so yes, in Pacific Ocean, there are, we can say, typhoons. West Pacific Ocean, typhoons are there. In Indian Ocean, we can see different kinds of, let's say, cyclones are there, and they are going to affect severely on these islands, including, we can say that, coral reefs of these, let's say, these islands. Then we can say coral bleaching. So climate change is also having, we can say, it is resulting into marine heat waves. And these marine heat waves are impacting corals. Coral bleaching is also going to affect major, we can say, source of revenue for all these islands is basically tourism. So like, for example, activities like scuba diving, snorkeling, or if you take the example of Maldives. So what will happen if the coral reefs are gone in Maldives or Mauritius? So people will not visit there. Why? Because it is not as beautiful as it used to be now. ठीक है, तो इस तरीके से हमें समझ में आना है. Then we can say that when the people are losing out on the basic resources on these islands like water, or we can say that the livelihood resources, we can say support, then they are going to leave that particular island for sure. So it will result into climate refugees in future. And yes, overall socio-economic impact of, let's say, increased natural hazards, or we can say that the impact of such migration from one place to other place, that is going to create some kind of social, let's say, tensions, or we can say that even psychological impact. So socio-economic impact, that is you can write in the end. ठीक है, तो आप ये examples लिख सकते हैं. Maldives, water aquifer salinity is increasing, coastal erosion is there, or Marshall Islands, flooding, infrastructure threat, ecosystem loss. In this manner, you can give 3-4 examples, 2 from at least Pacific, 2 from Indian Ocean, variety of examples you should give. Okay, and in the end, what we can mention is basically we need more climate change adaptation and mitigation measures. You can mention the, let's say, talks that are there, UNFCCC, United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, you can mention. And then you can mention the adaptation fund under it, or we can say loss and damage fund you can mention. Loss and damage. Right. So because these island nations, small island nations are facing the brunt, but they are not responsible for all this sea level rise and climate change. Isn't it? Okay. So this much, I guess, discussion is fine for this question. Now let's move on to next question. What are the non-farm primary activities? Okay, so this is very, we can say, unique question. They have let's say asked from primary activities, location of industries in primary, secondary and tertiary sector. So primary sector includes, we can say that, these farming activity as well as non-farm primary activities. Right? What kind of non-farm primary activities are involved? So that is the straightforward first part of question, we can say that. Second, how are these activities related to physiographic features of India? Second part, we can say, discuss with suitable examples in the second part. So in the introduction itself, you can first define non-farm activities. So non-farm activities are those activities in which the farming or growing of crops is not involved directly. So that is non-farm activity or primary activity. Primary activities are those activities which does not involve any kind of processing of resources or the let's say goods that we are deriving naturally from the earth. Okay, so yes, this is the primary activity. So what kind of non-farm primary activities are there? Let's try to understand them. First, we can say fishing and aquaculture. Second, forestry and lumbering. Third, animal rearing. Fourth, we can say that mining and quarrying. And fifth, we can say that salt making also is a kind of primary activity. Okay, so let's try to relate these activities with physiography of India. So many examples we have added here. In body part, you can simply give these examples and explain how these are related to different parts of the country. And finally, you can conclude with non-farm primary activities are shaped by India's diverse landforms and diverse physiographic divisions that we have in the country. So in this manner, you can conclude by summarizing the things. Now let's try to see what kind of examples we can give here. So first, fishing and aquaculture, physiographic features of India. So yes, we have marine fishing potential as well as inland fishing potential. India being having the large, let's say, coastline of about 7,500 kilometers, marine fisheries are there. Along with that, we have inland fisheries also, right? Inland fisheries, river valleys are there, okay, lakes are there, wetlands are also there, right? Okay, now examples. So major fishing areas, we can say Gulf of Mannar, Gulf of Kutch, Kerala backwaters, Ganga Brahmaputra plains, Chilika lake. And data and facts we can mention, if let's say space and time permits, that will be value addition, because some students may not write this. Why? Because India is the second largest fish producing country in the world in 2025, accounting for about 8% of global fish production after China. Within that, inland fisheries contributes to over 75% of the output. In economy, you learn in detail about this. Earlier, after independence, it was marine fisheries which dominated, but with government support later on, the inland fisheries is dominating now with 75% of total account. Then forestry and lumbering, the second factor, it involves timber, bamboo, medicinal plants and other forest products, or non-timber forest produce like honey collection, tendu leaves, and that gives, we can say that, a lot of income, especially for tribal people in central India, central Indian states. Like we can mention here, dense forest of central and eastern states. Mangroves in coastal areas, we can give example of Sundarbans. Then mountains, Himalayas, Western Ghats, Eastern Ghats. So they are forested areas which, let's say, gives different kinds of, let's say, products, like we can say food, or we can say fuel, fertilizer and fruits, flowers. All these are basically 5 Fs or 6 Fs that we talk. Teak harvested from Madhya Pradesh, Maharashtra. So teak is very important for furniture and other industrial use. Eucalyptus harvested for pulp and plywood in Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu. Bamboo production in Madhya Pradesh, Arunachal Pradesh. Non-timber forest produce collected by tribals. India is the second largest bamboo producer in the world in 2025. Such kind of data will be value addition in your answer. Then animal rearing includes poultry, cattle, dairy, sheep, or we can say goat, camel, yak, emu. So you can mention at least names here. Himalayas and other hilly areas, grasslands. First is this one, second grasslands, and third arid and semi-arid regions. They are also part of grasslands, we can say. Tribes like Gaddis, Bakarwals, Bhotias practice transhumance. During transhumance, what they do? They are basically, during summer, they are going to the upper reaches of Himalayas where the alpine meadows are open now, lush green alpine meadows. During winter, they are covered by the ice, so all these will migrate to the lower reaches. This is called as transhumans. For example, Changtangi goat in Ladakh and Pashmina wool that is derived from it. Dairy industry, Amul in Gujarat, camel rearing in Rajasthan, all these examples, and cattle, yes, cattle rearing is done throughout India. So no need to specifically mention poultry, cattle industry and all. India is the largest producer of milk in the world 2025, accounting for around 25 to 30% of global milk production. Again, data. Then finally, mining and quarrying you can mention. Okay, so peninsular plateau region, Himalayas, Aravalis especially, Western Ghats and coastal regions, sand mining. Mineral rich plateaus such as Chota Nagpur plateau. Then Karnataka, Goa belt, Vindhyas and Malwa plateau, coal, iron ore, all this mining is done. Marble from Aravali hills is very famous. India has 5th largest reserves of iron ore and is world's 2nd largest coal producer also. So why I am mentioning all this data, it is going to be very helpful for further preparation of new, let's say students, or we can say for 2026 preparation. All right, so finally in conclusion you can mention that yes, these let's say India is having different kinds of physiographic divisions with different kinds of climate, soil types, vegetation, and that supports variety of non-farm primary activities. That is, we can say that the better conclusion. Now next question is related to ecological and economic benefits of solar energy. Very standard question that UPSC keeps on asking on renewable energy. Sometimes they will ask wind energy, sometimes they will ask solar energy, and they keeps on repeating. So we can divide the answer in, we can say, two parts. One, we can say one ecological benefits, and second we can talk about economic benefits, although both are related to GS3, environment and economy. Okay, so let's try to understand the benefits and with suitable examples they are talking. In introduction itself, you can mention some data on India's solar energy potential and present installed capacity. So latest data we have taken here by the July 31st, 2025. India's solar energy potential estimated over more than 10,000 gigawatt. Like this, we can mention India's installed solar power capacity has reached to about 120 gigawatt. It accounts for approximately 24% of India's total installed power capacity. So that is good thing. We are increasing, and this significant increase is from, let's say, 2014 onwards. The present government is giving more emphasis on this. In body part, what you can mention is ecological and economic benefits. We can divide separately or in a tabular manner also. And finally, in the conclusion, reference to Paris agreements and India's commitments to Paris agreement in form of nationally determined contributions and how solar energy is helpful in achieving them. So look at the benefits here. So what kind of benefits we are having? Ecological benefits, of course, it is going to reduce the greenhouse gas emission and help in climate change mitigation. So some data you can talk about here. NTPC Ramagundam floating solar Telangana plant, 100 megawatt plant saves water and avoids annual emissions of this much tons of CO2. Right, so it is again from newspaper only, directly taken. Second, reduce air pollution. Of course, the thermal power plants, coal-fired thermal power plants, they are emitting lot of pollutants and as well as greenhouse gases. So that is resulting into lot of reduction in the quality of human life. Okay, respiratory diseases and increased morbidity because of air pollution in the country. You may remember the recent, let's say, global health quality life index that has been recently released, right? So that has said that India is having the average decline in the life or longevity by 3.5 years, and particularly Delhi for 8.5 or 8 years and 6 months. ठीक है, तो 8.5 साल हम कम जीने वाले हैं अगर हम दिल्ली में रहते हैं पूरी लाइफ. So that is the way morbidity is increasing and impacting human health conditions. Reduce harmful impact of fossil fuel extraction on environment and wildlife. That is also true, because solar energy is, we can say, without any kind of deforestation or affecting the lithosphere of the earth. So through mining, what we are doing, mining, coal mining, let's take example of coal mining. So we are basically disturbing the lithosphere, extracting it, deforestation, and because of that there is wildlife habitat destruction. So you can imagine, like in India, several states where coal mining is going on. So that has resulted into lot of deforestation, like Jharkhand, Chhattisgarh, Odisha. So that is, let's say, resulting into environmental pollution also. And the secondary effect, of course, is there on the people living in that area, tribal people. They are getting displaced, their livelihood is getting lost. ठीक है, तो ये उसके impacts है, ठीक है, soil pollution due to mining and all. Conservation of water, yes, so it is ecological benefit. How it is conserving water? Because at present, whatever the reservoirs we have, we can install the floating solar plants on them, and the evaporation from these plants can be reduced as they are covered by the solar panels, and that will help. Why? Because at present we have like 4 months of monsoon rainfall, lot of water in reservoirs, and during summer times they become dry, because for next 6 months, 8 months the water is continuously evaporated, and that is problem. So water will be more available. It is kind of conservation of water. Then reduced land degradation. For example, we are at present let's say having the land crunch for installing the solar power plants or renewable power plants. So instead of that, we can have the floating solar plants, and we can use the water surface for solar energy production and reduce any kind of land degradation further. So like for example, Omkareshwar floating solar park in Madhya Pradesh is going to be one of the biggest one. Now, economic benefits. Lot of economic benefits are there, like lower electricity cost. For example, we can say that India's current solar energy tariffs are about 30% lower than the existing thermal energy. Such kind of data, supporting data, is surely the value addition in your answer, that other students will not write that. They will write this thing, but they will not write the second part. Then reduced import bill, saving foreign exchange. It is very important. India imports 85% of crude oil and natural gas, and that is, let's say, resulting in lot of we can say that foreign exchange loss. In 2025, India's solar energy production is saving an estimated 1.26 lakh crore in foreign exchange annually. That is again a very relevant data we can mention here. Then employment generation, yes, that is also true. Government through, we can say, Green India Mission, National Solar Mission, and PM Surya Ghar Yojana, Muft Bijli Yojana, PM Kusum scheme. You can mention such names of the schemes, and through that it is providing some kind of, let's say, training, skill training for the rural youth, and they can let's say further be used as technicians for repairing all these solar plants, right? Installing and repairing solar plants. So Solar Mitra, we can say that, we can call them. Then rural development and prosperity, for example, government scheme PM Kusum. तो कृषि सेक्टर और एग्रीकल्चर सेक्टर के लिए ये स्कीम है गवर्नमेंट का, एंड फॉर स्पेशली इरिगेशन पंप्स, they will be like solar powered irrigation pumps. So that will help in rural development and prosperity. Reliable source of energy for industries and households. Yes, that is also true. We can say that, especially those which are independently mounted on the rooftop. So that is going to be reliable source of energy. Additional income generation to the households, like for example, Surya Ghar Muft Bijli Yojana. Yes, through this the people can sell the extra additional energy that they are generating through solar energy from their rooftop panels to the discoms, and they can earn the money, right? So these are some economic benefits. So finally, we can mention in the conclusion that yes, that is good that India is having good potential, but one line mentioning the challenge and the need to take care of that challenge will be very good conclusion in this aspect, because in future UPSC is going to ask that question. What question? It is going to create lot of e-waste, okay, or the solar waste that we are calling nowadays, because we are increasing the capacity to very large scale. After 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, they will be defunct. So what happens to them? So we need some kind of processing, recycling, of that solar waste. So that capacity also should be developed simultaneously. ऐसे आप 2-3 लाइन लिख दिए conclusion में, that will be very good conclusion. Okay, now moving on to next question. Now this is like last 10 marker question for your geography, and it was like pending question that I have been telling like 2-3 years, last 2-3 years, and 1 month ago also there was like tsunami warning in Pacific Ocean, Kamchatka Peninsula earthquake that had happened. So it was like pending question, and I'm telling you, they are always asking one question from any natural hazard or disaster that has happened in just 2 months of between prelims and mains. 2 years back, they had asked about dam failure. There were 2 dam failures in those 2 months only, one in Libya and other in Ukraine. Last year, there was, let's say, large scale cloud burst happened in Uttarakhand and Himachal Pradesh. Immediately they asked question. Or GLOF is also happened in Sikkim. So immediately they asked question. So this is how they keep on asking questions from natural hazards and disasters in GS1 and 3. So tsunami. So what are tsunamis? First part. Second, how and where. First is how. Second is how we can say, and where. Third, occurrence. They are formed. What are their consequences? So this is fourth part of question. Explain with examples. So supporting examples should be mentioned. So define the term in introduction, as it is 10 marker. You need not to give separate introduction, as it is like having 4 parts. So adequate weightage should be given. So in introduction itself, define the tsunami. Second, causes of tsunami formation. Mention the zone of occurrences with example. Give consequences of tsunami with examples. And finally, need of effective early warning system as a part of, we can say, mitigation measure. So first, defining tsunami. Tsunami in let's say Japanese term, it is called as harbor waves. They are different than the normal sea waves in a sense that causing factors are different. Normal sea waves are formed because of the friction given by the prevailing winds. They are transferring the energy. Ultimately, all these waves are nothing but the release of energy on the coast. The ocean water is releasing that energy at the coast. But the tsunamis are gaining that energy from different sources, and that is going to be huge energy, and that's why they are more destructive. Okay, so in introduction, we can simply write in this manner by defining tsunami. Then causing factors, so 4-5 causing factors, but priority wise, most important is tectonic factor. When the earthquake happens on the ocean bottom, generally the origin of, we can say, that tsunami waves happens at that place. Okay, so whenever the earthquake happens on the ocean floor, we are saying, then generally we expect the tsunami. Like for example, recently earthquake on Kamchatka Peninsula, Russia. Then volcanic eruption, second factor. Example, Krakatoa volcanic eruption 1883. It is mentioned in NCERT also, Krakatoa volcano in Indonesia. Then underwater landslide can happen, large scale landslide, meteor impact can happen, and submarine explosion. So it is a man-made factor, submarine explosion or nuclear test underwater. So that may result into tsunami. Now occurrences, you can draw the map here, world map if it is possible, otherwise you can mention the names of regions. Most common in regions around Pacific Ocean's ring of fire. For example, 2011 Japan tsunami. Also occur in Indian Ocean. For example, 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami. Look at the way we are giving examples, supporting examples. And Mediterranean and Caribbean regions are also prone to, we can say that, tsunamis. Why? Because the plates are interacting there. In Mediterranean, the plates like African plate is subducting under Eurasian plate, and that's why it is always prone to tsunami. Okay, so the occurrences where they are formed, you can mention like this. So briefly, let me explain what happens is, first of all, let's say there is a focus underwater here at this location, a focus of earthquake, and thereafter the epicenter is located just above it, and the energy is transferred to the water column above it. So there will be movement of water in upward direction, then there will be like release of that energy to the nearby molecules like this, and this is how we can say that movement of water happens. So it is a build up now, the energy from the earthquake is, let's say, causes the trains of simple progressive oscillatory waves. Now if you see in the deep sea, the wavelength of these tsunami waves is large and amplitude is small. So that's why the seafarers, or we can say that ships that are there deep inside the ocean, they may not feel the effect of tsunami waves. But as these waves are approaching to the coast, what happens is their wavelength is reducing and amplitude is rising. And when they are reaching to the coast, what happens is the amplitude is maximum, and the way water is receding back and it moves like this, and splashing effect is there on the coast, and that is going to create a kind of flooding situation. So build up, then travel, and then we can say approach towards the coast, and finally the impact. So water comes inside the coastal areas, and if that is not having the way back into the ocean through natural slope, because of urban areas, built up areas, that leads to flooding situation. Okay, so this is how the tsunami is problematic. Now, what I was telling is last part, consequences. Consequences of tsunami, first on environment, second on coastal habitations. So we can divide in a more structured manner like this and give one examples also. So on environment, what will happen? It will result into coastal erosion, damaging the coral reefs, mangroves and wetlands, salt water intrusion into the groundwater, freshwater aquifers. So there is question in GS3 on disaster management, saltwater intrusion. So this you can link, we can say that as a part of disaster management also. Now what happened in 2004 Indian tsunami destroyed vast ecosystems in Indonesia, Sri Lanka, Thailand and even Andaman Nicobar in India, degrading coral reefs, farmlands and coastal forests. Then in the coastal habitations, it is having very devastating effect. We have seen in 2004 tsunami in India, massive loss of life and property, destruction of infrastructure, ports, bridges and buildings, long-term impact on livelihood because of loss of fisheries, tourism, due to displacement and contamination of salt water with groundwater. For example, 2011, this Tohoku earthquake tsunami in Japan killed around 20,000 people, rendered 500,000 homeless, caused Fukushima nuclear crisis, showing both direct and secondary disaster effects. Okay, so in this manner, we can give some of the examples also simultaneously by relating to this consequences or impact. Now, as we see that tsunami waves are very having devastating effect, we need some kind of mitigation efforts, and the most important is, we can say, assessing the vulnerability or vulnerability mapping, and thereafter the early warning system. So the way we have in India at INQUIS in Hyderabad, we have India Tsunami Early Warning System set up there. It gives the early warning not only to India's coastal areas but also to the other littoral countries in Indian Ocean region. Similarly, the other countries, especially Japan, South Korea, China, they have developed advanced, let's say, tsunami early warning systems, and they are helpful in, let's say, dealing with tsunami disaster. Now, the 15 marker questions. Okay, so in 15 marker first question, you can see that 15 marker questions are more of analytical in nature and applied in nature. Give geographical explanation of distribution of offshore oil reserves of the world, how they are different from onshore. So offshore oil reserves and onshore oil reserves, and how they are different in terms of occurrences. So what we can do is, first of all, mention about the uneven distribution of oil and gas resources in the world, because in past there was one PYQ on this. Give distribution of offshore as well as onshore oil reserves on the world map. If possible, draw the world map. Explain the geographical factors responsible for distribution of oil reserves and explain their differences. Mention about India's oil reserves and energy security in the end as a part of conclusion. Now, when we are talking here about distribution of oil and gas reserves, yes, it is skewed. That means that is limited to certain parts of the world, and that's why their supply is always prone for, we can say that, disruption. Many times you can see that Gulf War, or we can say Ukraine Russia war was there, or we can say Iran Israel war, or US Iran conflict that is there. Many times the energy security is, let's say, a very, at that time we are concerned, because we are very much dependent on these, let's say, countries for supply of crude oil and gas. Now, first of all, we will see the distribution of offshore and onshore. Offshore means basically we can say inside the sea on continental shelf, and onshore means on the land. Now, let me first briefly explain what is the formation, how it is formed, crude oil and natural gas. Yes, the crude oil and natural gas is formed when, like thousands of years ago, there has been luxuriant marine life on the continental shelf or photic layers of the ocean. And after, let's say, all these animals are dead, they are buried inside the ocean floor, and there is temperature and pressure changes happening on that particular, let's say, fossils, that result into fossil fuel called as crude oil, natural gas, or we can say even shale gas and shale oil. Now, when we are, let's say, talking about formation of these crude oil and natural gas, what happens is due to certain tectonic movement, that particular land inside the ocean may come up due to, let's say, pyrogenic movements, or we can say upward and downward movements happens on the land. So that result in, we can say many times, the resources coming on the shore or on the, let's say, above the mean sea level, and they are basically at present onshore reserves. This is the basic difference in terms of occurrences. The question is talking about occurrences, right? So, and some of them remained inside the ocean. So, let's try to first of all locate the important reserves around the world. So, major reserve is, we can say, this region, the Persian Gulf region, we can say that this region, Persian Gulf or West Asia. Okay, West Asia. So, here we have Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Iran, Iraq, and let's say Syria. All these countries, or even we can say UAE, Bahrain, all these countries have significant both onshore and offshore crude oil reserves. Second important region is Northern Africa. Okay, Northern Africa, it is having, we can say, largely onshore reserves. Okay, onshore on land, we can say Algeria, Libya, Egypt, Tunisia. So, these countries have significant reserve. Then another area where onshore reserves are there, Orinoco Belt, Orinoco River Basin is there in Venezuela. So, we call it as Orinoco Belt, Venezuela, largest crude oil deposits or reserves in the world, Venezuela. Right. Then we can say that another region where we have significant deposits is Yenisei-Khatanga region. Yenisei and Khatanga rivers are there inside the Siberia region, Russia. So, that is also having significant deposits, we can say. Then in India, you can mention here Brahmaputra or Assam basin. Okay, Upper Assam basin, that is there. Then Northern Alaska you can mention here. Significant reserves, Northern Alaska. And here in Africa, Niger Delta. Niger Delta. Now, offshore reserves, you can mention offshore reserves, like you can talk about here Gulf of Mexico. Right, Gulf of Mexico is there. Then here you can talk about is North Sea. Then here you can talk about is Barents Sea. Barents Sea. In India also Gulf of Khambat, Gulf of, we can say that, sorry, not Gulf of Khambat, that will be onshore region. Here you can mention that Bombay High or Mumbai High, Basin, Alia Bait, that is region, and on this side KG Basin, Krishna Godavari Delta region. Okay, so in this manner we can give the distribution of crude oil around the world. At least mention the, let's say, Orinoco Belt, Persian Gulf and Northern Africa, that region is very, very important. Now, after mentioning this, you have to mention the differences, right? So, the way I explained, first of all, mention the differences in terms of occurrences. Pardon me. So, occurrences is the offshore reserves and onshore reserves. So, offshore reserves were once inside the ocean. There has been many, let's say, upward and downward movements of the land, and because of that they have come up the mean sea level at present. For example, the Tethys Sea that was present between Indian plate and Eurasian plate, that was having a luxuriant marine life as it was shallow, mobile waters, geosyncline, and because of that the present day Brahmaputra basin, Upper Assam basin, that is at present above the mean sea level, but it was inside the ocean, Tethys Sea, and that is, and thereafter we can say that a lot of deposits, fossil deposits which got buried, and that led to, we can say that, crude oil and natural gas formation. Same example you can give for Persian Gulf also, as at present it is, we can say, a kind of shallow continental shelf, and some of it has come above the sea level. So both offshore and onshore reserves are there. So in terms of occurrences, this difference is there. Thereafter you can talk about differences in mining also, or drilling. So we can talk about like offshore drilling is difficult as compared to onshore, right? Onshore is on land, right? So the drilling can be done in a controlled manner, and the pollution aspect can be also well regulated and controlled. But inside the ocean, there are chances that there will be marine pollution because of oil spills, or we can say that the machinery that is required there can get, we can say, rusted, right, because of seawater, and that's why it requires continuous maintenance. So more cost is involved there for drilling as compared to onshore oil, we can say that. Second, then transportation aspect. So transporting that crude oil from the inside the sea to the land and thereafter to the interiors to the refinery is more cost, let's say, consuming as compared to onshore. We can have direct connection and immediate refinery can be set up there itself near the oil drills, and this is how it is comparatively less costlier. But you can talk about the way drilling is done in different parts of the world. If you can see that in Persian Gulf and these regions, they invest more in terms of technology in extraction as compared to northern African, let's say, countries which are having comparatively, let's say, less development of technology. In this manner, you can give differentiation. Of course, last points will be more generic in nature. Finally, in conclusion, you can mention that it is required for all the countries including India to ensure energy security in 21st century. And for that matter, what we are doing, we are building strategic petroleum reserves. You mentioned this. So different locations like Visakhapatnam or in Karnataka, Pudur and Mangalore, we are building, let's say, strategic petroleum reserves so that we are able to ensure energy security, as we are very dependent on these oil exporting countries for crude oil supply. All right, moving on to next question. What it is saying, how can artificial intelligence, drones and GIS and remote sensing techniques can be helpful in locational and aerial planning? So they have mentioned 4 technologies: AI, drones, GIS, geographic information system, and 4th is remote sensing. And they are asking explanation in terms of locational planning and aerial planning. So total 6 points are there. So it is easier to structure all these, we can say that, answer. So what we can mention in introduction, increasing role of technology in various areas of locational and aerial planning. So first of all, let's talk about the aspects of aerial planning and locational planning. For example, we can say that the aerial planning includes land use planning, transport and connectivity, utilities and services and their distribution and delivery, and environmental and social integration. For example, planning for green spaces in urban areas, planning for community spaces in urban areas. This has been important part of spatial planning or in geography. These are basically geography optional terms, but they have asked in GS, generic terms are there. Of course, you can understand from Hindi translation also. Locational is about location of various, let's say, activities in urban or rural areas, like for example, agriculture sector. So what kind of crops should be grown in a particular soil or particular area? So it is a locational planning. Or what kind of, let's say, energy resource or let's say mode of transport should be there at a particular urban area, that is a locational planning. And that means if we are having or supposed to do or take decision on that particular locational planning, whether we are exploring all the alternative sites for that purpose. And for that, technology is very helpful. Okay, so in this manner, we will give all the examples by explaining role of AI, artificial intelligence, drones, GIS, remote sensing technologies in locational, and let's say giving examples. For example, we can give first like Swamitwa scheme. So it is related to mapping of all the land, especially in rural areas, and ownership. Okay, so to streamlining the ownership rights of over the lands, so use of GIS and drones, around more than 6 lakh villages have been, let's say, surveyed with the help of drones, and to streamline the land ownership, we can say that titles, Swamitwa scheme. Second, you can talk about is crop planning, or we can say cropping pattern. So in Maharashtra, use of drones for cropping, or we can say cropping pattern, to analyze and assess the which crops are being grown in a particular season, and so that the government can take certain policy decisions in regard to that purpose. Third, you can talk about is very, let's say, important is disaster management. Yes, nowadays the drones are being used. Like recent example in Punjab, you can see that the drone was used to rescue one person which was stranded in the fast flowing stream. ठीक है, तो अगर ऐसे हम ड्रोन का यूज कर रहे हैं, इन COVID-19 we have seen that drones were used for delivery of medicines. So I am giving one such example, and it is part of, we can say that, aerial planning. Now, drones can be used for survey of large area, and that creates or generate huge amount of data, including AI, GIS, Geographic Information System. Now, that data can be fed to this AI tools. They can do the big data analysis, or we can say that they have these algorithms. They can remove any kind of, let's say, possibility of error, or we can say exclude that error, and we can take better decisions in terms of, we can say, locational and aerial planning. So the governance, urban governance, rural governance, this can be more effective with the help of these technologies. Give such examples in your answer, and that is going to help you a lot. You can give one more example of, we can say, transport. Let's say in urban areas there is congestion, for example I am saying. So how remote sensing or drones helps? So in urban area, which areas are congested in terms of transport sector, road transport every day? At what time there is congestion, traffic jams? So if we analyze that data, then automatically we will be able to decongest that area, let's say area, those routes, with the help of appropriate aerial planning. In this way, we can discuss this topic. And finally, what we can mention is, as there is going to be increased urbanization in future, we need smart and climate resilient cities in future. Relate with that part. And smart cities mission, you can give that example also here. They use AI, they use let's say remote sensing technology, or we can say that this one, drones also, so that they, the technology aids in effective governance. Okay, smart city mission. So relate with climate resilient cities also, because in future urbanization is going to increase. Now further, next question. Very standard but applied in nature. If you are able to interpret properly this question, you will get full marks. How changes in shape and sizes of continents and ocean basins of the planet take place due to tectonic movement of crustal masses? Essentially, it is question on plate tectonic theory. And sea floor spreading, it is, we can say, somehow plate tectonic theory will explain all these things. So in plate, mention about plate tectonic theory in the introduction itself, that it explains that the lithosphere of the earth is divided into various lithospheric plates, major plates and minor plates. They are continuously interacting with each other due to underlying magmatic currents, convectional magmatic currents, we can say that. Simple introduction. Explain how convergent and divergent plate interaction result in changes in shape and sizes of continental ocean basins. So there are three types of plate margins or interactions: convergent, divergent and transform. Transform plate boundary does not result into changes in the size and shape. Why? Because it is not resulting into consumption or destruction or formation of new crust, right? So this is how you should mention convergent and divergent plate margins, and then give relevant example. Finally, in conclusion, give distribution of volcanoes and earthquakes, how they are related to plate tectonic theory as a part of significance. Now plate tectonic theory will explain first of all the divergent plate boundary. Okay, so divergent plate boundary, for example, we have a divergent plate boundary, there is formation of new crust being formed. Look at this. So there are magmatic currents going on in the asthenosphere, and that is resulting into divergent of this crust, divergent movement of this crustal mass here. Weak zone will result into upward movement of magma, that is magmatic eruption. So continuous basaltic magma eruption happening at mid-oceanic ridge regions, and that is kind of spreading site, we can say that, inside the ocean. But the theory also maintains that the older crust is getting consumed where? In the trench region. It is getting consumed in the trench region, and that's why we do not see wide scale expansion of sea floor. But sea floor expansion is happening. Like Atlantic Ocean is expanding at 4 centimeter rate per year. Okay, every year by the 4 centimeter it is expanding, Atlantic Ocean. So you can imagine after thousands of years the ocean surface is more as compared to land. Maybe this can happen in future. Okay, so this is happening, this data can be mentioned in your answer. So Atlantic Ocean is that example. Same is happening with Pacific Ocean, we can say, or Indian Ocean also. You can mention the mid-Atlantic ridge, or we can say Pacific ridges. Now, in addition to that, what you can make, now it is resulting into change in the size of the ocean, change in the size of the ocean basin. This is what the question is asking. Now, the shape of ocean basin, how it is changing? Yes, so there is continuous mountain range being formed here, parallel mountain range, that is mid-oceanic ridge being formed here. So new ridge is being formed, that is changing the shape of the ocean. Now, what happens is, due to tectonic movement, there is also something called as convergent plate boundary. In convergent plate boundary, what is happening? One plate, that is heavier, denser plate, is subducting under the lighter plate. Generally, the oceanic plate is more denser and continental plate is lighter. So that is subducting, right? And that is resulting into subduction zone and melting of, let's say, rocks, that is resulting into lava, magma formation, and moving up there is volcanic eruption. So on the convergent plate boundaries, generally what is happening is there is volcanic eruption, volcanic mountains are getting formed. This is resulting into change in the shape of the crustal masses. Also, due to convergent plate boundary, the crustal masses are getting folded. So we see the fold mountains, like for example Himalayas and Alps. Himalayas and Alps, we see that there is folding of sediments, that is resulting into parallel mountain ranges like Himalayas, Alps are there. Okay, so that is changing in shape of continents. Okay, so this example you can give. Divergent plate boundary, you can give one example, one more example, that is African rift. Okay, East African rift is spreading, or we can say the African plate is breaking there, and because of underlying mantle plume, that is resulting into, let's say, eventually it is being said that after like 10,000 years, there will be formation of new ocean there. So from that Red Sea, Ethiopia, the new ocean is going to start form there, and thereafter maybe the Africa is broken into two land masses and the new ocean will lie between it. That is also one more example. Now, in addition to that, you can give example of ocean-ocean convergence, like we have the Pacific plate and Philippine plate interaction. Okay, or let's say Australian plate and the Sunda plate interaction, formation of Indonesian islands, Philippine Islands, Japanese Islands. So they are basically formed on the ocean floor. So ocean floor shape is getting changed. Understood? So changes in the shape and size, give such supporting examples and then only you will get marks. Simply mentioning that the plate interactions, plate boundaries, it is not going to help. Now finally, in conclusion, you can relate with Pacific plate or ring of fire, the way there is continuous changes happening, or let's say volcanic eruption is happening, new shapes are being formed. Or you can mention the way, you can give example of mantle plumes and hotspot volcano, Hawaiian Islands. That is also changing the shape of, we can say that, ocean basin. So new islands being formed, hotspot volcanism. In this manner, we can relate in conclusion. Then finally, the question is from demographic geography. Every year they are asking demographic geography related question. Like last year they asked question on migration related. Okay, so migration from small towns to large towns, we can say big cities. So this year they asked question on distribution and density of population in Ganga river basin with special reference to land, soil and water resources of that region. So mention about total population of India supported by Ganga river basin. You can mention that total population is around let's say 43 to 45% of total population of India. It is supported by Ganga river basin alone. So that will be like striking figure. Then give distribution of population and its density by dividing Ganga basin. Give significance of land, soil and water resources in such distribution. And in conclusion, you can mention role of this Ganga river basin in terms of agriculture and the water resources of India. So how we can divide Ganga river basin? We can divide Ganga river basin in generally three parts. One, upper basin in Uttarakhand, Himachal, hilly areas we can say. Second, middle basin in UP and Bihar. And third, lower basin in West Bengal. You can see that the density goes on increasing, population density. And the distribution, you can see it is sparse in upper basin in mountainous region. It is what? Mountainous region. Okay. So average density of Ganga river basin is 520 persons per square kilometer. Of that is like India 380 or 385 average. So it is more than a national average of the country. Then middle basin, let's say why it is sparsely populated? Mountainous region, mountains and valleys. So we can say that it is, let's say, difficult for agriculture and connectivity, transport, and that's why sparsely populated. Also we can say that it is extreme climate. These mountainous regions will have extreme climate. It is not livable climate for throughout year. Then middle basin, yes. Now these two are like, we can say, suitable for dense population. So most densely populated middle basin, 829 persons per square kilometer in UP, Bihar 1106. In some of the cities of Bihar it is more than 2000 persons. So why it is, let's say, more dense these regions? These regions are more dense because the soil is, we can say that, fairly fertile. You should give that land, soil and water resources aspect, right? So soil is very fertile, we can say very high groundwater table, as well as we can say canal irrigation for agriculture. We can have canal irrigation like upper Ganga basin, not upper Ganga basin, or we can say western UP, is, let's say, dense canal irrigation. You can give example here. Then you can talk about is easier for connectivity. So dense network of roads, and we can say that railway networks is there. Land is, we can say that, plain. The slope is gentle, land aspect. So that you can mention that, yes, because of that also there is high connectivity, and that's why it is supporting dense population. And ultimately, in conclusion, what you can mention is try to connect this with India's food security. The Ganga basin is basically the granaries of India, food basket of India, and you can mention some challenges that this region is facing. Okay, in the conclusion part, you can mention like this region is facing challenge of floods, okay, especially lower basin. So that is flood prone area due to shifting courses of rivers, or we can say annual flooding phenomenon that happens. And in addition to that, you can also mention that these, let's say, states were not beneficiary of green revolution that we experienced in 1960s and 1970s, especially this lower basin, we can say. But western UP, yes, it benefited because of large land holdings, as well as we can say the canal irrigation and all these things. So you can briefly mention in conclusion that we need to bring these green revolution to the eastern states of, we can say, Bihar and West Bengal, which have enough water resources as well as fertile soil. So I guess you have understood all the questions properly. We have tried to discuss in detail. If you have any question, ask us in the comment box and we will try to address that. Yes, the other sections will be taken by the respected faculties of Lukmaan IAS. Thank you.